this verse, I think, misused. Now, what do I mean? It seems that people have used this verse to say that you are never to say the word like Trinity or some false god like that. Well, I don't believe that's what it's saying. Now, it sounds like it in English, but let's just look at some of the words and see how they're translated in other places and try to understand maybe a different perspective, okay? Notice it says here, make no mention. Okay, no does not show up in the original Hebrew, so and make no is nothing, it's not there. The word mention shows up of the name, okay? So mention, name. What are we doing here? Mention, let's triple click that. And to mark, as to be recognized, to be remembered by implication, to mention, as also to like burn incense to earnestly mention, or to make mention of, to be mindful, to recount, to remember, to make to be remembered, to bring to the mind, to put in remembrance, to think on, to contemplate. So, okay, this is more like of a worship style. I just was mentioning the other day to a group that I'm here with, they were mentioning what's been good for you this last year. And one of the things that's been good for me is to have an opportunity between 4 to 6 times every weekend to share something from the Word of God. And it's that's been amazing. I tell you, it's hard. There's a lot that goes on. You know, you've got to try to do this and study and prepare and all this stuff, edit, and there's a lot. It's not easy. But the looking back and seeing the growth has been for me incredible. I'm just overwhelming incredible. I have been able to go through the book of Revelation 3 times, the book of Matthew for the most part, the book of Exodus for the most part, Hebrews and Romans and Isaiah and, 1 John and the book of John. That one wasn't recorded, but it just keeps on going. And there's so much that's involved with learning in the book of Daniel as well. And just learning over and over and deeper. And it's just amazing. And so I've been really blessed, and I look forward to continuing to learn. So I've said 1,000 times, I don't know everything. I mean, just yesterday when I was in the meeting, there was somebody who pointed out something that I haven't studied for as diligently as they have. So they said I had a false understanding, and I admitted. I said, well, listen, that wasn't really my point. I was trying to focus on that because that's what I know and understand. But what you said, if you did something to present a message, I'd be glad to learn about it. And so that's still how I feel. You know, if you guys learn or know more than I do about what I'm sharing, just feel free to share. Let me know. And some things I'm not as interested to focus in on and study as I have been on other things. So, you know, I mean, if you have a real burden for something, I might not have that same burden. So allow me time to grow with you. And you might be ahead of me in some ways, and I might be ahead of you in some ways, but whatever. We're all trying to grow together, and we all have different focuses for different purposes. God has called me for a reason, and God has called you for a reason. So we all have opportunities to grow and learn. So anyways, that's just what's on my heart this morning. But we're going into Exodus 23 right now, trying to learn a little bit more of what it is that God is saying to his people in the judgments, which we know are called ordinances or statutes. And those ordinances, as we learned earlier, it's not translated that as often, but it is translated ordinances when we're talking about the judgments starting in chapter, I believe it was 21 or 22. So now we're going to go into 23, which is preparatory to 24. Now, why is that important? Because 24 is when the sanctuary comes into play. And in the book of Exodus, from chapter 24 and onward, we're going to learn a little bit more about the sanctuary. I don't know everything about the sanctuary, and no, I have not read that book. You probably are thinking, ooh, I hope he goes on these thoughts that's in that book. Nope, I don't read books. I try to read the Bible and the writings of Sister White, and I still have much to do in that, so I'm not generally reading other books outside of those things. And as a result, I lack in some of my understanding, but I'm still trying to gather from the harvest of those books. So, no, I'm going to share with you some thoughts from the book of Exodus and the sanctuary from my own thinking, generally the way the Lord has led me. You might be far advanced in this, which is great, but you're just going to have to be patient with me so you can help me learn as well. So that's what we're going to do with each other in these meetings. Now, we're going to be looking now at this chapter, and I'm going to share with you a couple of things here. Exodus 23, and by the way, for those that have just come on to the video, we've already prayed together. We're enjoying each other's company beforehand, and now we're going to go into the study. 23, continuing on with the ordinances or judgments and thoughts and ideas that God has for his people. Thou shalt not raise a false report. Ooh, I like that. I like it a lot. In fact, thou shalt not bear false witness, right? That's just like kind of an explanation or a further idea based on that foundation. A false witness is horrible because, you know, you can do that in so many ways. And we've already talked about this, I think, in another meeting with another group, probably from Australia, if I'm remembering correctly. But what happens is, if you were to say, like, for example, if somebody comes up and says, hey, have you heard of this guy, this preacher named Daniel Mesa? You might be like, yeah. Yeah, I've heard of him. Then what does that do to the person who just asked you? They're thinking, oh, I need to stay away from that because of your actions. You see, what you've done is potentially you've borne a false witness. You're giving something that's contrary to what is true. Now, this person, Daniel Mesa, might have a lot of truth. Yeah, sure, you might disagree with him on some things, and that's what you're responding on. Yeah, he doesn't whatever, and he doesn't whatever. But a lot of stuff that he says is good. You might be bearing a false witness. And so right here, what we're learning from this is thou shalt not raise a false report. That's basically the same thing. And it's frustrating when that happens. Oh, I tell you, not just with me. I'm not saying like people say that about me all the time. It has happened, and I know. But, you know, this happens all the time. And we as God's people supposed to be keeping his commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness. We too often raise a false report. Okay, like think about the 10 coming back from the land of Canaan. The 2 were faithful, giving a good report, whereas the majority were bearing what? A false report. Okay, you can see it biblically as well. Put not your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. Now, what does that mean? Put not your hand. Well, that's kind of like raising your hand, showing your hand. If you just triple click that word put, it's to place your hand, to apply, to bring up, if you will, to lay up your hand. Like, so you're thinking that if there's somebody who is going to be judged, okay, and they're going to be judged in a way that you know it's not exactly right, if you raised your hand in that crowd to say, yeah, he's wicked, you know, yep, then what you're doing is you're putting your hand with the wicked to an unrighteous witness. You're witnessing incorrectly for a person who potentially had a false report. You know, like, for example, let's go on with that same Daniel illustration. If you asked about, hey, have you heard about this speaker named Daniel? And the guy's like, yeah, I know about Daniel. Yeah, what about Daniel? And you've already got that, you know, first initial reaction. You're thinking, well, you know, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know much about him as you do. So somebody asks you about Daniel. Have you heard about Daniel? Your response is, yeah, I know about Daniel. And I was talking with this other guy who knows about it too. And now all of a sudden you're bearing a false witness with the wicked because that wasn't a good thing to do to begin with. So, you know, be careful the way you interact with people, okay? Be honest, be open, be as genteel as possible when you're trying to interact with those that have an influence for good. And because we're not supposed to bear a false witness, and we're supposed to be unified, and if you continue with those kind of actions, like I'm asked about people all the time, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I try to be very careful to answer as positively as possible. And then I will also say there are some things that we disagree with. Here they are. And, you know, I try to be as matter of fact as possible just because I don't want to bear a false witness. I want to expose that which is, I believe, false. But, you know, so that's one thing that I believe could help in the One True God movement is that if we all just tried to get along without trying to better ourselves or somebody else. And, you know, that seems to fit in here with this, thou shalt not raise a false report scenario. It says in verse 2, thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. And you can see that's kind of similar in Proverbs chapter 1. My son, don't follow a multitude to do evil. It's kind of the same thinking, right? Neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. Now, what does that mean? You are speaking, so your voice will be heard, in a cause or a movement. There's a split off of the main group, or there's another split off of the split off, and now you're speaking in this cause to go down, to go south, to go declining after many. So now a crowd, to wrestle what judgment should be. Judgment should be righteous, but you're wresting judgment. So don't speak in a cause to go downward after a big group to destroy what should be judgment, righteous judgment. And that makes sense. Don't follow a multitude to do evil. It's kind of the same thing. This right here is now spoken again in this phrase. So that's kind of what I'm getting from that. You might have better thoughts about it, and feel free to share at the end. Neither shalt thou countenance a poor man in his cause. Now, this word countenance, you're trying to figure out what this means. To swell up. Okay? So now there's a poor man here. He has a cause, and you're not going to swell him up. You're not going to look at him and, by implication, to favor or honor him, to be high or proud, to make him high or proud, to make it glorious what he's trying to do. Because, listen, he might be a poor man, but he's still, if you're countenancing him and lifting him up, he might, in his cause, become proud as well. So whether you're a good guy with wealth, whether you're a good guy with no wealth, you still could be led into temptation. So treat every man alike. So don't countenance a poor man in his cause. Help him out if he needs help. Like, for example, here, if you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey, his ass going astray, but remember he's your enemy, you will surely bring it back to him again. You're like, wait a minute, but he's my enemy. Oh, this is mercy. This is grace. This is Christian kindness, right? So now it says in verse 5, if you see the ass of him that hates you lying under his burden, you're like, you know what? He fell down and he's stuck. This donkey or this ass of my friend, well, he used to be my friend, but now he's my enemy, right? He's lying under his burden. And you know what? I'm just going to leave him there. I'm not even going to help him. If you would forbear to help him. What says, thou shalt surely help with him. It's like, don't just leave somebody or something because you don't like its owner. I mean, that seems to be very cruel, right? That's not Christian. Well, I don't even like this guy. I'm not going to help him out. Well, then get over your carnality and help him out just based on, practical kindness. And so, sometimes you have to compartmentalize your emotions. I don't want to help that person. He's not a good person. He's not been good to me. Well, your actions right there might actually win him to recognize that, man, I would never have done that to him, but he just did that to me. At night when the Spirit is working on his mind, that person might just be converted. You never know. And so these acts of kindness are really powerful in this realm of the kingdom of Satan and the kingdom of God. Because you never know how the angels can influence somebody at night, whispering into the ear, do you remember what he did to you and the kindness on his face? He was so nice. He was so thoughtful. Would you have done that? I don't think you would have, but you should have. So now listen, you need to be doing what he does as well, right? So whatever the Spirit ministers to that person who has been influenced by you and your actions, that's a really powerful thing. And so you never know what it's going to be. If you find somebody that has gone amiss and you don't like that person, or they don't like you, well, treat them nicely anyways. You might be surprised. It says in verse 6, thou shalt not wrest the judgment of thy poor in his cause. Well, what does this mean? It's very similar to verse 3. Now, I can see that my computer's pretty slow right now, so I'm going to try to get up there. There it is. Neither shalt thou countenance a poor man in his cause. So don't make him proud in his cause. Don't countenance him for what he's doing, because, he too could become proud. What about in verse 6? Thou shalt not wrest the judgment of thy poor in his cause. So wait a minute. The poor has a cause. And the poor has been misaligned or maligned, I'll say it that way. He's been maligned in his, his purposes. He wants to do something, whether it be good or for himself or for others. Well, don't destroy the righteous judgment of that poor person. Well, don't lift him up in his actions either, in his cause. So, don't bring him down, but don't lift him up too much either. Just treat all men alike, and you can be respectful and kind, and you can give, nice things to say to people, but just be careful in how you do it. You don't want to be leading people astray, either to wrest the judgment or to lift them up in pride, like it says in verse 3. Keep thee far from a false matter. Okay, so what is a false matter? A matter would be a situation that is a matter of a thing, a cause, advice, an affair of some sort, an answer, a book even, it says. Business, a care, the Chronicles, commandments, whatever comes out in communication, it could be a false matter. Keep yourself far from it. Don't go whispering to a neighbor, you know what I heard about that guy? And you know what I heard about them? Well, unless you're sure that what you heard is true, you might just be bearing a false witness. And therefore you're partaking in spreading this false matter. And what it's saying is, keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. So if this person is innocent, but there's a false matter that's been brought up about this person is righteous. Well, don't slay them with your words, or don't slay them in your actions because of this false matter, because you are going to be not justified. Okay? So this stuff to me is very practical as far as Christian practice and good morals, right? So it says there in verse 8, thou shalt take no gift. Now the gift would be like a financial gain of some sort. Thou shalt take no gift, for the gift blinds the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. Now, I was thinking earlier, like, what would this be? Okay, so this has never happened to me. I guess, maybe I don't countenance it almost for even a minute. So I guess I wouldn't recognize it much unless I really thought about it. But if somebody were to come up to me and say, hey, I've got a real big sum of money in my account. I'm willing to give it to you in your ministry to be able to do all these things that you want to do. But you got to stop teaching this, or we want you to start teaching this. If somebody came to me like that, I'd be like, not interested even for a minute. No, not interested. Because those kind of gifts, those briberies, would make the wise to, how does it say it there? It would pervert the words of the righteous, and it would blind the wise. Now, I'm not the most wise, and I certainly am not ready for translation. That's why I'm still here. But I want to be wise, and I want to be righteous. I really do. And I think my life reflects that. But see, I don't want to receive some gift, and I don't want you to either. I'm just using myself as an illustration here. I don't want to receive a gift to be blinded. Like, you know what? Hey, I could use a lot of money because this and that. Well, you know what? No way. Because now you're going to start turning your eye to truth to follow after the gift. No way. And Christ dealt with that as well in his teachings in the New Testament also. Also, thou shalt not oppress a stranger. Why not? Well, you know what the heart of a stranger is, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And how were you feeling like when you were oppressed as a stranger? Well, that didn't feel very good for you, right? So do as unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? You've heard that before, haven't you? That's in the Sermon on the Mount. Well, new paragraph here, verse 10. 6 years. Wait a minute, years? Normally it's 6 days, and the seventh you should rest, right? But 6 years thou shalt sow thy land. So put various grains in there, and it's not best to always sow the same kind of grain. You want to mix up the land a little bit, and that's part of what this is about. But 6 years sow the land, and thou shalt gather in the fruits thereof. But in the seventh year thou shalt let it rest and lie still. And part of that reason is not only to feed the poor that are around you, but also to enliven your soil again, to enrich it. Because listen, if your soil keeps giving minerals and keeps giving minerals and keeps giving minerals, and you harvest and you take all the stuff, you clean the field and you get rid of all the stuff that you don't want to, I guess you do want it there, but whatever. So one of the things that this is going to do is take the growth and the harvest that you would have taken off the land and it's going to come back into the land, and it's going to replenish the soil. Every 7th year, that's what's going to happen. And it's just a good practice in being a gardener. Now, I can't say too much about that because I've never had a large field with a garden. My mother has when I was a kid, and she did a wonderful job. But I never have. I've had gardens, but I've also had some really very active deer that have destroyed everything in the gardens. And so we can go on to that for a while, but we don't need to. You know what I'm talking about. The animals come and destroy everything if you're not like basically built up like some kind of armory. And so anyway, 6 years, you're going to sow your land and gather the fruits thereof. But, so contrary, but the 7th year, let it rest and lie still, that the poor of your people may eat. So it's for the poor, but not everybody is poor, and you're not going to have the whole field harvested. So the poor of the people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat, which they're going to clean up everything, kind of like the deer in Central California. In like manner, thou shalt deal with thy vineyard and with thy olive yard. So what you have is you're going to take care of the beasts and the poor, and not everybody starts their field on the same year. So think about this for a minute. If this guy starts in this year, and the next year this guy starts, well, he's going to end his 6 years 1 year earlier than this guy. And so that field will be barren for the 7th year. This field is going to be barren for the next year, which is his 7th year. And then a field over there is going to be barren for the 7th, and a field over there. So the poor and the animals, they actually could go around and kind of work it to where, like, we don't have enough. We are provided by God's laws and his judgments and statutes for this people. And so we're blessed by this. And so what happens is they go in and out around the neighborhood, if you will, not begging necessarily. This is God's command. So they are just simply enriching themselves from how God is taking care of the poor. They don't have a field. They don't have enough money to buy one, and neither has it been gifted to them by inheritance through their family. They just ended up in a poor lot. And so God is taking care of these people. So really, frankly, nobody in Israel was supposed to be poor. They were supposed to be provided for and taken care of. And that's what this 7-year project was all about, right? And so you can see that God was doing a wonderful thing here for his people. In verse 12, 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the 7th day thou shalt rest. Now this is not years, this is days. So this is where the Sabbath comes in. Now notice this Sabbath commandment. It's a little different than the other one in Exodus 20, and also a little different than the one in Deuteronomy 5. 6 days shalt thou do thy work, and on the 7th, not a 7th, but on the 7th, which is the Sabbath, because on the Sabbath you're not supposed to work, right? So we know that this is the Sabbath commandment. On the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, thou shalt rest. Here's the reason. That it's not because God created, as it says in Exodus 20, and it's not because God delivered, like it says in Deuteronomy 5. It's that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thy handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed as well. So this is a little different, which is interesting because now you have a command in the statutes, if you will, where basically God is saying, I want you to keep my Sabbath. Do that for the land as well, to take care of the poor, but don't forget my Sabbaths. And this time the focus is a little bit different. It's not for the creation or for the redemption. It's for the fact of refreshing. And so the land needs to be refreshed, and the human body needs to be refreshed as well. Do you see how that works together? 7 years, 7 days, with those two verses. And so God is not only taking care of his land, he's taking care of his people. And also the servants that are probably the more poor, because if you can afford servants in your home, right, you probably are more wealthy than they are. And so these servants need to be taken care of, and the oxen and the asses as well. So God is so merciful. He's so thoughtful. These laws are so beautiful because what they're doing is they're showing us Christian principles of how to live and how to take care of not only the earth, but also those that are with us. And so refreshing is a big part of this Sabbath commandment. In verse 13, in all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect. That means respectful. I'm going to open it up here. To guard about those things, to hedge about. Like, don't forget some of those things that I've said. To attend to be ward, to be circumspect, to take heed, to be a keeper of, to observe, regard, and save for yourself. So what's happening is all things, God said through his son in Matthew chapter 4, that man shall not live by bread alone, but by everything, by all things that I have said. Be circumspect, pay attention. And make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard of thy mouth. And so I have seen this verse, I think, misused. Now, what do I mean? It seems that people have used this verse to say that you are never to say the word like Trinity or some false god like that. Well, I don't believe that's what it's saying. Now, it sounds like it in English, but let's just look at some of the words and see how they're translated in other places and try to understand maybe a different perspective, okay? Notice it says here, make no mention. Okay, no does not show up in the original Hebrew, so and make no is nothing, it's not there. The word mention shows up of the name, okay? So mention, name. What are we doing here? Mention, let's triple click that. And to mark, as to be recognized, to be remembered by implication, to mention, as also to like burn incense to earnestly mention, or to make mention of, to be mindful, to recount, to remember, to make to be remembered, to bring to the mind, to put in remembrance, to think on, to contemplate. So, okay, this is more like of a worship style. Make no mental assent and cognitive recognition of the name of other gods. Okay, so don't go in and like bring into remembrance in a honorable mention way. How would I say that? Honorably mentioned way. Don't make that the name of false gods that way in the minds of other people. Because what you're going to do is, like, if I spoke favorably of the false gods of Canaan or of the Philistines or of the Hittites or Amorites, then, somebody might be interested, like, well, hey, I want to go check out what they're doing and kind of see, because that sounds really interesting. Don't make an honorable mention of other gods. Okay, I don't think it's saying never talk about them, because God would have asked his servants, the prophets, to go contrary to his laws, if that was true. Because what they did is they called out the false gods by name. Baal, Astaroth. You've heard of these, right? So you know that the false gods were actually mentioned in the Bible. And so what is that? Is that proof that what they did was sin? Or what this verse is different than what it sounds like? This verse is different than what it sounds like, because God was not leading his people into sin in any way. And so what we have here is this carefulness that we should have. If you're going to speak about the false gods, speak about it in a way that is clear, that it's not something you should go and run after to try to find out about, okay? Like the false worship and stuff that they did actually led many of the Israelites into sin. I believe it's Numbers 25. You can find for yourself the apostasy at the Jordan, and you'll see that they were involved in their worship orgies. And that was because people probably made mention of the name of other gods in a favorable way. And they were like, the men are like, well, really? They do that in their worships? I might want to go see. And so they got onto the internet and they found for themselves some of those women that were dancing like in Numbers 25. Anyways, it says there in verse 14, 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Okay, so 3 times. Now, I would say that knowing the scripture in the book of Hebrews specifically, this is referring to the Levitical priesthood. And we know that Jesus is not a priest after the order of Levi. In fact, it says in Hebrews 8, verse 3 and 4, if Jesus Christ were a priest today, if Jesus Christ were here today, he would not be a priest, seeing that there are priests after the order of the law. Which law was that? That was the law of Levi. If Christ were here today, he wouldn't be doing the feasts. He wouldn't be doing the Levitical thing. He is the priest after the order of Melchizedek. Okay, so these 3 times a year, I believe we can learn from them. But knowing in the book of Hebrews how this clarifies, I don't think that we're called to, as mentioned here, come to Jerusalem 3 times a year. So it said, or where God's name was placed. So they're to keep a feast unto me in the 3 times in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread, which we know is like the feast of, Passover, right? So the unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee, in the time appointed in the month Abib. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. So if there were a time you recognized the ideas of God taking his people out of Egypt, good for you. That's wonderful. To call it a law today, I think it would be a very far stretch. So that's the Passover. Notice in verse 16, the feast of harvest, which would be Pentecost, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which would be like the feast of tabernacles, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field. 3 times in the year all thy males shall appear before the Lord God. Now, I know that there are people that do keep the festivals today, and they actually have. I know one guy not too far from where I'm at right now. He works in construction, and he's worked it out to where the person that has hired him allows him time off 3 times a year. In most of the society today, that won't work very well. You won't find Target or Walmart or most engineer corporations or other businesses. They're not going to work that way with you. You only get 2 or 3 weeks off, and maybe you can organize it that way, but it's certainly not something that you could do for today. And my own position, I wouldn't die for that. I wouldn't lose my job for that. But in regard to the 7th-day Sabbath, which is a law that came actually before those ceremonies and statutes and judgments, ordinances, before that is the law of the 7th day. That was given in creation, right, along with the law of marriage. That I would die on that hill, if you will. I would lose my job for that, because that is definitely God's law, illustrative of his character. Remember, the 10 Commandments are light and eternal and love and pure and holy, just and good. All those things that you can see in a list I actually have on my Revelation with Daniel website. But there's another one that, another law, if you will, that you can't find those things. It's not holy, just, pure, perfect, righteous, eternal, etc. That's the law that was given to Moses, the law written on paper instead of the law written on stone. So there's 2 laws there that are really dealt with in a way that's quite interesting. Both of them are, because you can learn tons from both. But one of them is eternal. The other one was here till the seed should come. And we know in Galatians chapter 3, that was the law that was stopped at the cross when Christ fulfilled everything by his sacrifice and then entered into the priesthood of Melchizedek. And it was at that point that Christ fulfilled in reality the types of what were exposed in the Levitical priesthood year after year after year. So going on 3 times a year, you'd go and you'd work with coming together with all the males before the Lord. Now it's interesting because there's another verse in Deuteronomy 16:16 that says the same thing. 3 times in a year shall all the males appear before the Lord your God in the place which he shall choose. Okay, in the feast of unleavened bread, which we know is Passover, in the feast of weeks, which we know is it's the feast of harvest, which is the feast of weeks, which is Pentecost. So 3 times: unleavened bread, the feast of weeks, which is harvest, or ingathering, which is tabernacles. Okay, so the same thing here is referred to in Deuteronomy 16, and it says that you're not going to, show up before the Lord empty. Same thought here, which is in this area. I think it said that. I thought it did. Maybe it didn't. Anyways, I'm just going to continue on here. Thou shalt not offer thy blood of my sacrifice with the leavened bread. Now, what's interesting about this, the more you think about it, I think the more it becomes clear. Do not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread. You see, Jesus even said it. The flesh profits nothing. But he did say you were to eat the flesh and the blood. Remember? So that's in John chapter 6. It was in a sermon that he presented at a church, actually. It was in a synagogue. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with the leavened bread. Now, the sacrifice would be the flesh. Jesus said the flesh profits nothing. But you are to eat the flesh and drink the blood, remember? He never said the blood doesn't mean anything or profit anything. But what he did say is that the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit, they are life. So the blood was left over by Christ as he was illustrating that in that sermon. And so the flesh profits nothing, but the words, which are spirit and life, that's what is referred to as bringing forth the blessing. So here it seems like the blood, you remember, because life is in the blood, according to Leviticus, I think it's 17. Leviticus 17 says the life is in the blood. Well, here you're to not offer the life with the death, with the sacrifice, which with the leavened bread, right? So neither shall the fat of my sacrifice remain until the morning. Now I can understand the fat is where all the poisons are stored, and that would be like a reflector of sin. So neither shall the fat of my sacrifice remain into the morning. So it's going to be burned. And so there's actually quite a bit here that could be talked about in this, but I think we'll learn more as we continue on through the sacrifices as well as we get into the sanctuary. The first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord thy God. So not the latter part of the first fruits, it's the best of it, the first of it. This is the tithe that God is asking for. The first of the first fruits of thy land you'll bring into the house of your God. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. Now, seethe a kid. This only appears 3 times in the Bible. Let me see if I can do this here. So this word, this phrase, seethe a kid, the first time here we've read it in Exodus 23. The next time is also in Exodus 34. The first fruit, or it's kind of the same thing. The first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. So almost identical wording, if not identical. But then in Deuteronomy 14, you shall not eat of anything that dies of itself. Thou shalt not give it unto the stranger that is in thy gates, that he may eat it, or thou mayest sell it unto an alien, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. So I don't fully understand this concept, but perhaps you do, and at the end you can share with me a little bit more. But there's 2 things that I see here, okay? So this idea of not putting the life with the death is what's prefaced here. So don't take the blood with my sacrifice and mingle it with the leavened bread. So then the best of the first fruits bring to the Lord. You don't want to treat a kid, which is a goat, and that which gives life to that kid, which is the mother's milk, don't kill it in that which is supposed to give life. Okay, so that's part of what I think it means. But also there, think about this, not just looking at the kid necessarily, like the goat itself, but think about the mother. The mother has very full bladders filled with milk. And if the kid isn't absorbing that life-giving, milk to that kid, then what's going to happen is the mother is going to become very uncomfortable and potentially get ill. So what you have, and it's like a co-working together. You got to take care of the mother and you got to take care of the kid. So if you allow them to work together in nature as they're supposed to, then it's all good. But if you take that away and you boil the kid in its mother's milk, you're actually killing it by what should be giving it life. And so there's a lot, I think, in there, but I don't understand it fully. There's still something that's a hole in my understanding in regard to that. So if you do understand more about that, let's talk about it at the end. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. So this is, by the way, a new paragraph. And behold, I send an angel. So who's the one that sent that angel? And this is a capital A, I think, based on the translators, because really it's just the word that means an angel, specifically an angel of God. It's also a prophet or a priest, a teacher, somebody that has a message, okay? And it's been translated here with a capital, but that was, I think, based on the translators. It's not necessarily that which is to be translated with a capital A in the original Hebrew. But you get the point. It was Jesus Christ that was with his people. Behold, God the Father says, I send my Son, an angel, a messenger. That doesn't mean Jesus was created. Absolutely not. He was begotten. I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him. Now that doesn't mean like be scared of him necessarily. It means, what does beware mean? To hedge about, to protect him, right? To protect or attend to him. We looked at this word earlier, to be circumspect or observe, to reserve or regard him, okay? So kind of the same word as we had learned about earlier. Beware of him and obey his voice. Why? Well, because he is an angel. What does an angel mean? A messenger. I will send someone with a message. Oh, okay. So God sends his son with a message. And the son is going before the children of Israel. Listen to him, beware of him, be circumspect of him, and obey his voice. Why? Why obey his voice? Because God sent him as a messenger. Get it? He's got God's voice. He's got his words. Provoke him not, for I will not pardon your transgressions. For my name, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Wait a minute, he won't pardon your transgressions? He's not as kind as God the Father is? Is that what it's saying? He's not going to forgive your sins? No, that's not what it's saying. This word pardon, if you triple click it real quick, there we go. It's in a great variety of applications. It is to lift. He will not lift up your sins. He will not accept them. He will not suffer them to continue. He will not bear them or carry them. He will not contain them, exalt them. He will not forgive or, let them go as though they never happened. Oh no, you will have to suffer the consequences of sin. So listen to him. Pay attention to my son. I've given him a message. Obey his voice. Don't provoke him. Don't treat him, like it says, to abuse him or make him bitter. Don't cause him to be moved with choler, as we can see, like the goat there, or the he-goat in Daniel. So don't provoke him, for he will not neglect to punish your transgressions. Okay? He's not going to lift your transgressions from you as though they never happened. You will have to suffer not listening to his voice. Now, the reason why I want you to listen to his voice is because my name is in him. Now, the name of God is Jehovah, and we're told by Sister White that Jehovah is the name given to Christ, but we also know that this word means the character or authority, or authority. My authority is in him. My character is in him. I've sent him as my representative, my angel, and my name, my character, my authority is in him. All power has been given unto the Son. Before, of course, he became a human, and then after his human experience of overcoming, it was gifted back to him. And so for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice, and do all that I speak, all that who speaks? Not all that he speaks, all that I speak through him, you see, then I will be an enemy to your enemies, and an adversary unto your adversaries. Well, who is going to be? God the Father will be an enemy unto your enemies. So now, if you listen to the Son of God, my friends, you are listening to the voice of the Father, and the Father has said he's going to be the one that steps up behind you, and he's going to be your rear guard. I mean, that's awesome, because, this is the most powerful being in the universe, God the Father. He was so powerful, he was able to give all power to his Son, okay? He was able to establish his Son in the eyes of anybody who could see that his Son was divine and equal with himself, because he was sitting on the throne of his Father, you see? So they're both there together, and this God has said, if you listen to his voice through his Son, then he will be the one that has your back. That's pretty powerful to me. So it says there in verse 23, mine angel shall go, which is, of course, the Son that he has sent. Mine angel shall go before thee, and bring thee in unto the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. So he's going to destroy, so I will cut them off, right? So notice, my angel will go before you, and I will cut them off. So who's the one that delivers you from your enemies in the Old Testament? That's God the Father of the messenger that he sent. So the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, they don't have anything against you or over you if in fact you listen to the voice of his Son. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods or give them honorable mention, nor serve them, nor do after their works. Learn from the children of Israel. They can teach you a lot of things about false gods, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images. I like that. So now, all of a sudden, you're overthrowing the false gods of the land. So now, if we couldn't make mention of the false gods, then how could we overthrow them and help people to know the differences between that which is right and wrong? So again, that verse that was mentioned earlier as one that I think has been misused, fits in very well here, because our job is to actually destroy the false gods of the land. That's what God said to his people. If you follow my son, the angel that I'm going to send before you, I'm going to wipe out everybody for you, and you are going to be my tool in the hands of the God of the universe to destroy all the false gods around you. And so people ask me all the time, like, why do you teach about God all the time? Well, because I'm trying to lift up the true God in contrast to the false gods. And that's really what I like to do, is I try to stick to the affirmative. I like to see both the, how does it say, both the goodness and the severity of God, as it says, and I think it's Romans 11, either 9 or 11, I don't remember. But we're to look at both the goodness and the severity. That means that we're to see both his, his love and his mercy, but also his justice and his wrath. And so you can see that God has given us the ability to not only stick to the affirmative in who he is, but sometimes we're to go out and destroy the false gods. And that's what I actually enjoy doing. So, and theologically, of course, but thou shalt utterly destroy or overthrow them and quite break them down. And you shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. Sickness, pharmakia? You mean like, God, we don't have to follow the false health message of the world, because if we follow you, if we serve you, and you're going to bless our bread and our water and take away the COVID from us? Well, that doesn't mean if you get COVID that you're a sinner. I get it. But the Lord has promised that we're healthy. We can be full of life and vigor if we follow the laws that God has given us. There shall nothing cast their young, nor be barren in your land. So wait a minute. You're not going to have, like in Exodus, the early part of this book where they were trying to, do partial birth abortions, where like if it's a male, kill it, right? Well, no, I mean, you're not going to have that in your land. You're not going to have the, the young being cast, or as it says, nothing's going to be barren in your land. And the reason why is the number of your days I will fulfill. I'm going to be there with you, and I'm going to be the one that fulfills your days, makes them full. And so God is promising so many blessings to his people if we will follow the voice of his son. I will send my fear before thee. Now this is the fear. This is the fright. Okay, something. It's an idol as a bugbear. What is a bugbear? I'm not sure what that is, but it's dread, it's fear, it's horror. To be full of terror. Okay, so I'm going to send my fear before you. In other words, I've got your back. And, you don't worry about anybody around you. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, don't worry about them. I've got your back. The Americans, the Canadians, the Russians, Australians, don't worry about them. I will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come in contact with. I will make all your enemies turn their backs unto you. In other words, you're going to be the one with health. You're going to be the one with children. As it says here, they won't cast their young nor be barren. You're going to be the one with your family being blessed, and you're going to be healthy. Okay, so this is an amazing section of promises here. I will send hornets before thee, and shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, the Hittite from before thee. Now this verse is really powerful, but it's also kind of sad. Why do I say it's sad? Well, God was promising, like, I'm going to send out hornets before you. And I'm telling you, if I was in the land and God sent hornets against me, I'd be gone. I'm out of here. See ya. I'm done. No problem. I'm going to go find someplace else to go. Well, that's what he meant to do. But remember, when God sent his people out into the Canaanite land to go and find a report, the 12 that were, chosen representatives, so kind of like the General Conference came together, representatives from all the people. They went out and they were supposed to find this report, like, can we take them as God said? What are their cities like? What kind of growth do they have in their fields, etc. Well, they came back, and 10 of them were unfaithful, and 2 of them were faithful, and 10 of them were the ones that had the greater voice, and so they were listened to, and the 2 were supposed to be stoned and killed, like, Joshua and Caleb. And what happened is that God's people ended up going into the wilderness for 40 years. So they were not blessed because they didn't listen to God. They didn't listen, they didn't believe, they didn't have the faith. And so instead of sending hornets before them, as he had promised to do, he actually changed the game. And he told them that they would have to go in and kill them themselves. And so God was supposed to bring them out of the land without any problems, without any war. But because God's people didn't listen to him, then there was war that ensued. Okay? That's really what happened. That's why that verse is both powerful but also sad. I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year. Why not? Well, then the land would become desolate. Well, the abomination of desolation, you can learn from that concept in this verse, because the land would be without people. It would be desolate if I drove them out. So the desolation is here referring to people. And it would become an abomination because the fields would be empty and all the critters would come around, and, the beast of the field, as it says, would multiply against you. So the land would be without people, and the beast of the field would multiply. By little and little I will drive them out with hornets out from before thee, until you are able to increase the land, and then you will inherit it. So really, it's like God is planning that over time, hornets would come and drive them out, going, let's say, from the west to the east, and everybody's moving east. And then God's people are also moving east to kind of just fill in the land, to take over, and they would have all their goods. That was God's plan. It was beautiful. It was brilliant. But God didn't have a people that would listen. And as it says in Hebrews chapter 8, all the promises of God were good, but the promises of the people were bad. And so what happened is, it ended up that they weren't able to go in the direction that God would have them to. So that's what his plan was. And it says, I will set thy bounds from the Red Sea even until the Sea of the Philistines. You're going to have a long, long area, and from the desert unto the river. So that's going to be yours. I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and thou shalt drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. And that's really that's very important, because God here, right at the end of his commandments of the statutes, we can see that he's making it clear, don't be false worshipers, or like worshiping false gods. Don't be idolaters. Don't make a covenant with them. They shall not dwell in thy land, lest they make thee sin against me. For if thou serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto thee. And so now we go into chapter 24, which again is dealing with the building of the sanctuary. So just as he had done previously in his comment regarding the Ten Commandments, right after that he made mention, like, don't make any gods of gold, don't make any gods of silver. So not only after the commandments did he bring up idolatry, after the statutes he ends with the concept of idolatry. God has given us laws so that we are not idolaters. And really the first law is, thou shalt have no other gods before me, right? And so that whole concept is if we had the one true God as our God, the only God, as the one that leads us, then we would honor his son as also divine as he is, because his son sits on his throne. We get that. But what we would have is no problems with any other commandments. We would have all the other commandments just in place. We would have no worshiping of false idols, as is in the second one. We wouldn't take his name in vain. We would remember his Sabbath day. We wouldn't steal, kill, commit adultery. We would honor our fathers and our mothers, and all that stuff would come into line if, in fact, we had the one true God as our God. And so that is the first commandment on purpose, and it matters. And so really, idolatry is a big deal. But these statutes, I think, are really helpful for the Christian walk. I mean, learn from these things. We can see them and fit them into our own lives and realize that, like, wow, I can learn that if I lend out my car or my truck or my tractor, which would be the ox in that scenario, or if I come up with somebody and I see them, they're having trouble, but they're not my friend or they're my enemy, I should still treat them kindly. All these things can be that which you can learn from in your own Christian life through these statutes and judgments. So I find them to be very helpful in today's world, and I think that we can all grow from them. Well, let's commit ourselves in prayer to God and to his Son and to the ministers that he has laid out for us, so that we can also reflect his character and be a blessing in this world when, not everybody is willing to be. So let's bow our heads and pray. Our Father in heaven, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to learn a little bit more in this chapter of what it is that we can learn from you, from your statutes. We can be blessed in them. We can see the principles, how they apply. They apply so much in our lives. And we pray that you would help us to be reminded of these kind of principles, these good moral principles, when we are interacting with others, so that we can be a good witness in life generally. Thank you for this in our business, in our school, in our activities. We can have direction from you. Bless us, please, that we can win souls from the kindness and activities that we choose based on your direction. We thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen. A bugbear, a specter used to excite fear, an object or source of dread, a continuing source of irritation, a problem. Okay, a bugbear. I can't remember ever seeing that word. A good sermon, thank you. Whether or not we should keep the feasts is by Nick in Inoshku. Should we keep the feasts on YouTube? That's probably a good one. A good sermon as to whether or not we should keep the feasts is by Nick. So yeah, that's on twice there. Good.